fast enough or does not resign before getting impeached, will he press the nuclear codes? Is he crazy enough to do that? He's a self-loving human being, but also incredibly insecure. So might he think, I'm going to take that risk and see if we can hit them first and not think things through, which is he's notorious for not thinking things through. So this is an everyday concern. It is, how quickly can this guy get impeached is to me a very sensible question, because I think the world will be a safer place when he is no longer president of the United States. He's a danger to the United States and to the rest of the world, as is the guy in North Korea, the leader of North Korea, as potentially is every nuclear state, as could Putin under pressure, could Russia be under pressure. So everyday concerns like that are, in a sense, they could be a source of worry. But when I contemplate the infinite nature of life and say, hey, even if humanity goes completely extinct, of course it's not okay, but in the ultimate sense it is okay, because ultimately we are just a collection of atoms, and if the human species becomes extinct, that's not the extinction of the atoms out of which humans are composed today. It means that these atoms go into an infinity of different life forms, a post-nuclear world of cockroaches. We will exist as part of the consciousness of cockroaches at some point, or these insects, these animals, basically, that micro animals that can survive in extreme heat and sub-zero temperatures. They're called, forgotten their name for the moment, but we could be part of the consciousness of these micro animals who might be the only survivors, together with larger creatures such as cockroaches, etc. Microscopic animals might be the sole survivors of an all-out nuclear war, and possibly cockroaches and other very small insects. We will exist, humanity, the atoms that make up the 7.5 billion humans today, will exist in the consciousness of these creatures, not as human consciousness, as insect consciousness, which is basically a very primitive consciousness. Will still exist in a very kind of primitive form, but also in even more primitive forms such as minerals and plants, animalistic life forms such as plants, and sub-plant life forms such as minerals in terms of complexity of structure, and so forth. So basically, this is a source of great wisdom, in the sense that when we think like that, when we take time to connect with the infinite nature of life, we put things in a much larger perspective. We put things in a perspective that transcends the merely human perspective, the merely, are we going to survive? Will humanity become extinct? And we rise above that into, okay, so if humanity becomes extinct and I can do nothing about it, okay, I can do nothing about it, but I'm alive today, and by connecting to the infinite nature of life, I actually acquire wisdom. Wisdom is always, one definition of wisdom I'm thinking, is always the capacity to look as if from a distance. So when we look at a situation, whatever the situation is, as if from a distance, it gives us perspective. And wisdom is basically a wisdom could be defined as a vaster perspective than the normal perspective. If humanity dedicates, as I have dedicated, to the contemplation of, to the connecting with the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of everyday life, if humanity dedicates to that, then it is basically dedicating to the acquisition of wisdom. and all of humanity could become wise, it will be normal to be wise, and we will look back upon the year 2017, this year, we will look back upon this year and say, well, in 2017, we didn't have very much wisdom. Look who the United States put in power, Donald Trump, and how much wisdom did he have? That's if we survive, of course, and so forth, and look at what's happening in the world, conflicts here and there, and so forth, but also potentialities for great wisdom, potentialities for humanity to dedicate to connecting with the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of everyday life, potentialities for humanity to dedicate to the acquisition of wisdom through the contemplation of the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of everyday life. So that's why contemplating the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of everyday life is, to my mind, a great source of wisdom. And why is it a great, and in my experience, very limited experience, but nevertheless experience, in my limited experience, it is a great source of for the acquisition of wisdom. And wisdom is a source of great joy. That's the final point I'm wishing to make, and I will seek to explain why I feel this is the case. You see, how much joy do we have when we're in conflict? When I'm really angry, which has been very recently, when I'm really angry, I'm in anger mode. I'm just, this is really bad, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at a microcosmic situation, or to explain what I mean, I'm looking at a situation regarding, for example, my colleagues at work. I might get very angry about a situation at work. There's not much wisdom in that. There's very little understanding. But if I can get away from this anger and go into the contemplation of infinite life, to connecting with the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of everyday life, then I'm very, very far removed from anger. And in that space of being very, very far removed from anger, there is wisdom. In that space of wisdom, there is a source of deep joy, in the sense that I feel above it all. In the sense, of course, I'm not above it all. If Donald Trump presses the nuclear codes, I will be a victim as much as anyone else of a nuclear holocaust. So I'm not above it all, but for the moment, every moment in which I am able to contemplate, while alive, in which I am able to contemplate the infinite nature of life, is a moment when I can be, as it were, as if above it all, when I can distance myself from or see these minutiae of everyday life in a much vaster perspective. And seeing things from a much vaster perspective is a source of wisdom, and living from this space of wisdom is actually ultimately living from a space of great joy. I don't believe that there are more joyful human beings on this planet than the wise, than those who really see things as if from a great distance, simply because then their interactions in everyday life are far more measured, far more civilized, far kinder, far more loving, far more considerate, and so forth, and they become a source of great joy to others, in the sense that people find them less threatening. Of course, somebody like Donald Trump will find somebody like me threatening, simply because he cannot abide criticism. He cannot abide me saying that he's a danger to humanity, which to him is a great criticism. You're talking about the President of the United States. and he will find a reason to make me seem like a very bad person. So basically, and if he could take this, if it ever makes it up to YouTube, if he could take this off YouTube, he'd be very happy to do so. So basically, I will not be a source of happiness to certain people, but I would like to be a source of happiness to somebody like Donald Trump. I'd like to help somebody like Donald Trump see that he's I've listened to the guy who co-wrote The Art of the Deal with Donald Trump, has produced what I feel is the most beautiful and accurate character analysis of Donald Trump, which is incredibly alarming as well. He's somebody who lived with him, effectively almost Gooders lived with him for a year. He was working alongside him for a year to write a book which he suggested could be called The Art of the Deal. So Schwartz even suggested the title, and Trump had no patience even with Schwartz, and Schwartz ended up getting his material by listening in with Trump's permission to Trump's business calls for hours and ends, and then going to these people that Trump had contacted to interview them, and he got a completely different perspective of Trump from these people, that everybody was afraid to criticize him, and that's the way he is. Not even his children dare criticize him. The only words that he will hear are words of praise, which Schwartz says just wash over him as well, and he can't get enough. He wants more and more and more. So basically, I would wish somebody like Donald Trump to dedicate his life to the contemplation of infinite life, to dedicate his life to connecting with the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of his everyday life. Because if he did that, I think we would get, I would say, to begin with, somebody who will happily give away half his wealth to people that he has wronged, women he has made untoward advances towards, to business people that he has ripped off, and ordinary citizens like you and I, whom he has ripped off in some way or another. I haven't been ripped off. I actually purchased a couple of his books at one point. Haven't read them, but thinking, maybe I should read these books to kind of be a bit more savvy about making money rather than just stay as an employee all my life, which is what I am at the moment. So really, but then I discovered who effectively wrote The Art of the Deal and polished up Trump's personality and lived 30 years to regret having done that. Schwartz. Check him out on YouTube. Very good analysis of Donald Trump, the best, I think, that I've come across. But I would dearly love somebody like Donald Trump to dedicate his life to connecting with the infinite nature of life in the minutiae of his everyday life, because I think that would be a source of great wisdom and joy for Donald Trump. And we need Donald Trump to be greatly wise and greatly joyful in that wisdom. And we